Letter from the Gantry.
Well, let's start in 1976. Only 4 nations in the finals, staged in the old Yugoslavia. And my main job was behind the scenes, editing the matches for ITV's highlight show later each evening. The first semi-final was between the then Czechoslovakia and the 1974 World Cup losing finalists, the Netherlands. In the bowels of the London studios, I had already completed my edit of the first half and was hurried back into business when the game went to extra time. The 90 minutes had finished 1-1, a goal and then an own goal from the then Czech captain Anton Ondruš. Both teams were also down to 10 men, both dismissals by a high-profile referee of the time, Clive Thomas of Wales. I was then made aware of a technical problem. Brian Moore was ITV's main commentator, but his sound line from the stadium in Zagreb had only been booked for 90 minutes, and in those days you could not extend such facilities at such short notice. An emergency substitute had to be found back in London. I got the tap on the shoulder. It was getting on for 11 p.m, and I was the only person in the building who had any commentary experience at all. In my case, a dozen or so matches for the old Southern Television. As it was a highlights programme, the 30 minutes of actual extra time was cut down to not much more than 10 minutes. But those highlights were played out on the air. My voice was added live. There was a lot of action to cram in. 2 Czech goals to knock out the famous Dutch, who had a second player sent packing by referee Thomas. For me, it was a big deal. I thought a big break. But here we are, 48 years later, and I still haven't come across anyone who heard it. Czechoslovakia, the underdogs, also won the final, that Panenka penalty, which does get plenty of mention still. My main memory of Euro 1980 in Italy is of giving co-commentator Ron Atkinson, soon to be the Manchester United manager, pronunciation lessons, particularly for the Greece squad, but only by the pool and not before 5 p.m. Big Ron had his priorities. He was lots of fun, as was the Belgium team, which lost to West Germany in the final. 1984 was France in France, 9 goals in 5 games from the great Michel Platini, including back-to-back hat-tricks. I ran out of superlatives by the end. 1988, like now in Germany. I drove round the autobahns from game to game to the sound of Prefab Sprout's King of Rock and Roll. The kings of the competition were the Netherlands, who were so thrilled at beating West Germany in their semi-final that they didn't make a fuss when Hans van Breukelen, their Nottingham Forest goalkeeper, insisted that I came straight into the victorious dressing room as the players left the field. Gullit, Van Basten, Koeman and company must have wondered, what the heck? It was a rare and privileged snapshot of a great celebration from great players. On to 1992 in Sweden. England were there, a last hurrah for Gary Lineker, but the story was Denmark, a fairy story. The Danes had been called back from their holidays to make up the numbers. The breakup of Yugoslavia had seen them disqualified. Denmark became European champions, but it was bittersweet. Kim Vilfort spent time between games with his 7-year-old daughter, who was critically ill with leukemia. His family insisted that Kim kept playing. In the 2-0 win in the final against the now unified Germany, he scored the second goal to clinch the triumph. All of us who knew the backstory had tears in our eyes. Euro 1996, 16 nations for the first time, including the host England. I've covered over 350 England games, and few, if any, better the 4-1 demolition of the Dutch. There was also that Gascoigne goal and Seaman penalty save against Scotland. Stuart Pearce's proud penalty in the shootout with Spain. Gareth Southgate's semi-final heartbreak from the spot. Germany went on to win the trophy via the recently introduced golden goal rule, which also applied 4 years later, when France overcame Italy in Brussels. I had a reporter's job that year and no accreditation, so post-match I had to ask the players to step outside the stadium. The likes of Paolo Maldini, Muzzy Izzet and Frank Leboeuf helped me out big time. Kindness that I would never forget. In 2004, Wayne Rooney was rampant, but in the end, Greece was the word, defeating the host Portugal with very disciplined defending and a breakaway goal. Euro 2008 was split between Austria and Switzerland. The football was good, and it was the start of a golden era for the winners, Spain. But the views on the regular train journeys between the two countries were even better. 2012 was also split between Poland and Ukraine. England played 3 successive group games in Donetsk, but were then knocked out by Italy, that penalty curse again, in Kiev, as we called it then. Italy reached the final, but were no match for the defending champions Spain, who since their previous Euro triumph had also won the 2010 World Cup. In 2016, Alan Smith and I were working for UEFA. We were staying in an official hotel with our French crew. Not the best place to be when the news came through of Brexit. Our stock within the group tumbled dramatically. France also suffered football-wise. Portugal had failed in the final as host 12 years earlier. Now they put the same hex on the French, despite losing Cristiano Ronaldo after some 20 minutes. Eder, a one-time Swansea City striker with a very poor international scoring record, came on to grab the winner. Portugal had survived a testing semi-final against Wales, who did the home nations proud, knocking out Belgium along the way. England lost to Iceland. Much more embarrassing within a tournament than in the week before one starts, as has just happened. 2020 was, of course, COVID restricted and actually held in 2021 and staged all over the continent. Alan and I were together again, but based at Wembley, so no awkward political questions this time. I have spoken before on this podcast of crossing paths with Luke Shaw when he was playing in a primary school match. He was already tipped for the top. I was, inwardly, very proud when he gave England that early lead in the final of the European Championship. It could have been, maybe should have been, the winner against Italy at Wembley. Well, fitness permitting, he's got another crack at it, coming right up.